Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rebuild Local. I am Vicky, your host for this session, or MC. And my guest today, we have, or our guest today for Rebuild Local, we have Jen Ashley, founder of technoday.com and lead of Google's WomenTechmakers. We have James Parton of MD at Bradfield Centre and author of devrelbook.com, and also was ex EU MD of Twilio. And then of course we have Neill, Gernon, co-founder and CEO of Yard, co-organizer and also co-organizer at Dublin AI. So before we get into it, just a little bit about Rebuild Local for those who who just joined us, is to provide a place for local events and community organizers to share insights and learn the tools, tactics, and best practices used for rebuilding local developer tech communities. And you can find details at rebuild-local.yard.live. So do you want anything else to add, Neill, about just quick bit?
No, looking forward to getting into it and hearing from the guys a little bit of background.
Okay, so let's get into the introduction. Let's tell me about. Oh, okay. Let's hear about our guests. So, Jen, tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Vicky and Neill. I'm glad to be here. So yeah, I'm Jen Ashley, and I, as Vicky said, I run a group called Techno Day. It's basically a conference for women in tech, which I've been running since 2017. It happens twice a year around International Women's Day and also around Ada Lovelace Day in October. And I'm involved with so many other different community groups in London, as Vicky knows. So yeah, it has kept me busy, before the pandemic, and it's kept me busy as well during, lockdowns.
Here, yeah. Okay, we're on to James. Tell us about yourself.
Sure, yeah. So I wear a lot of hats, but I think the most relevant one for this is the Bradfield Centre in Cambridge, where I'm the managing director. So the Bradfield Centre is a kind of tech hub. So at any one time, we have about 100 startups in the building. And prior to lockdown, which I'm sure we'll get into, we were running something like 300 tech events a year. So, super vibrant, really busy. And then other people might know me from my kind of developer relations and building software developer community work. So, I've been at Twilio, Telefonica O2, doing that kind of stuff. And as you mentioned, co-authored a book with Caroline Luco, which is coming out in September on A-Press.
Awesome.
Congratulations.
So Neill, yourself, tell the folks who you are.
So, hi everyone. So I'm Neill Gernon. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Yard. And also, I suppose, I'm the co-organizer with Vicky of Rebuild Local, an initiative by Yard. Background and context to myself. So by total accident, I got into building and running technical communities back in 2012 after a failed startup. And I understood I'm not great at coding, I'm not great at design, but I can do the people and process stuff. So started off randomly as a byproduct of my contacts in information security and built the Cyber Startup Summit, which was a community and a conference to connect all the multiple stakeholders from government to investment to startups to the developer community to try to kind of have a push on information security. And that was run in Ireland and the UK with Tech UK and IDA. And then randomly it came back to Ireland and transitioned into AI that I had been exploring within information security. And I started Dublin AI as an initiative to help support the development of Dublin's AI and machine learning cluster. So that basically got shelved during COVID, and this is what I do now.
And to the audience, I'm a coder, tech event organizer. I advocate diversity in tech, and that is normally my volunteering hat on. As Jen understands how I met her, I do a lot of different things as well. My day job is the community lead at Yard, working with Neill. I'm also officially, my title can also be the resident tech mystic with a unicorn. So I'm very happy to be able to put that on my LinkedIn profile. So thank you. So that was so that's the introductions. Again, thank you everyone for coming along for a chat about the importance of local technical communities. So let's start off with this first question. So the past year has been quite disruptive due to COVID-19 for in-person events and conferences. What are the challenges and solutions that may or may not have worked when working with local tech communities? Like, for example, how to keep the communities engaged and grow them. So I'll leave the floor open. Someone can answer.
So so there are two levels of challenges that I've the past 16 months. First is basically motivating the community leads to do something, and also obviously like motivating attendees to attend events. It's been very difficult, obviously, to like get people to invest because there's so many choices. But what we did, for example, for one of the groups that I'm involved with, which is called Google Developer Groups, most of the GDG leads for the UK and Ireland got together, and rather than doing like small events, we collaborated, and we've been collaborating for the past 16 months, basically. So there are like 19 GDGs that are working together and creating events, so that we, as I said, we don't need to do like piecemeal events, which are kind of the same, and we do it like in Bristol or London, when we can actually just offer it to like every one of our members at the same time. So like the effort to create an event is lesser, but we're reaching out to more people because there are like 19 groups working together, tapping in into their membership, and basically directing them to attend like a single event. So I think that worked well for us. But as I said, like motivating people to do something has been a challenge.
Yeah, I think as a fellow organizer, I hear you when trying to just get the motivation, especially when you're running so many different. For me, I run various different groups from Pie Ladies, Women Dublin, Women Code Dublin, and others, and I just find that especially when you have a team of people, getting the motivation going, just to start something, that's the hardest one. Once you get one going, hopefully you can keep going. So. So what about you, James? Any insights from you?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned in the introduction, before COVID, at our peak, we were doing something like 300 events a year. So to go from that to zero, like seemingly overnight, was quite a blow. Not only from the business perspective, but also just the impact on the team and the people and the community, right? I mean, all of those people that poured kind of blood, sweat, and tears into building such a vibrant community had the rug pulled under their feet for no fault of their own, right? So, people, it's pretty soul destroying. People were furloughed. Some people, unfortunately, were made redundant. Really, really impactful. So, to Jen's point, about motivation and also just keeping the morale strong of the team that's still in place, and just hoping that day will arrive where we can start to rebuild for the future. We tried a few things during that lockdown period because, if nothing else, that kind of crisis forces you to innovate. So we tried various things. We tried to replace some of the serendipity of being in a building like the Bradfield Centre by trying to implement things like, community Zoom calls with members and stuff like that, but it just didn't work. It kind of fell flat. It just doesn't replace that in-person spontaneity. But other things have kind of taken on. We launched a podcast during lockdown just so we could, tell the stories of the members in our community and help give them a bit of marketing support and to reassure people that there still was a community, even if that community was temporarily kind of dispersed from the actual physical building. and that's proven. I mean, we're not threatening the iTunes chart or anything, but it's proved fairly popular and kind of it's niche, but it's interesting. So, if anyone's interested in learning more about the companies and startups in the Cambridge area, then take a look at that on all the usual podcasting platforms. So, we've tried a few things. We've changed our membership packages and just tried to be responsive and flexible, and have just been patiently waiting for, the restrictions to slowly relax.
Yeah, like for maybe I'll bounce off of James, I suppose, for myself. One of the things that comes to mind from both what James and Jen mentioned was basically the lack of value or the questionable value that an organizer was having when you get to put stuff together offline and you have a vibe of in the room and engaging with people, get a pat in the back, become an MC, and you just that positive response feedback loop that you get at the end of an event when people are like chatting, even if they're not chatting to you or whether they're chatting to you, is kind of a good vibe. And I think that's a lot of organizers, their character, their personality, they vibe off that. There's not much you get back other than that enabling the connectivity of those people and facilitating. And when that's gone, when you're just transitioning to online, and when that is stupidly hard, then it's very questionable the value, or even then you kind of question the motive sometimes to do it. That's what we found. And I suppose that's actually part of the motivation for even Rebuild, right? Like, so Rebuild Local, we were chatting to all the organizers all across the world, not just Europe, even like some in India and the States, and we're speaking to them individually, and we're like, all right, it's not going to be like a constant, oh, we're here, we're online, because many of them had like just killed their meetup groups. Some were static, waiting, figuring out for the first 6 to 8 months like what's going on here, and others were using a tool stack and putting on events, and then you've the numbers of the events is like questionable, and so we just felt like it was like, I suppose, a little bit harder, certainly different to do online, and then they also have to figure out hybrid, and it was kind of the purpose behind actually putting together Rebuild. So get them speaking, get them connected, get them to discuss, as Vicky always says, like AA for meetup organizers. Just get them like, how was the past year? What are the challenges? Why did you park your meetup, or why have you kept going? How has it been? And try to kind of collect some of the knowledge that we've been finding in drips everywhere, and collectively try to document it and provide them with like a little bit of maybe some tools and best practices and how we kind of take it forward. So that's my piece. That's some of the challenges, especially around the motivation, and then maybe Rebuild Local. Like, that's from our biased perspective, is just maybe a mechanism to facilitate that engagement and the learning. I
suppose from my when the COVID-19 started, no one had any clue what they're going to do. Like, how long it's going to be? Like, it's going to be, we'll be back in a few weeks. This says 6 months. What do you mean 6 months? And then a year. But I remember I actually had to try and figure out tools, what people are using, because I still want to run stuff, even though I can't do it in person. So I started collating all that information. And then after a while, I was just actually quadrupling amount of work. I was trying to keep track of online events, especially local ones, what tools they were using, then writing newsletters and all that kind of stuff. And then, but there was a lot of people I noticed that did not restart their meetups because they were just waiting. Some of them just stepped back, as Neill pointed out, like they were just closing their groups. But some people just didn't know what to do virtually. So as we come closer to, like at the moment here in Ireland, they're discussing about opening back up events now. Just get your popcorn ready, everyone, I suppose, time and watch if you're interested in that kind of in politics there. But everyone's waiting and seeing what happens. Are we going to have in-person events? Because everyone is just striving for that, as we all mentioned here, that connection, that vibe. As you get in concerts, you don't have that vibe watching a concert through a cinema screen or through a TV screen. You know, it's the same with events. You don't have that same vibe. Even if someone who's like, some of the people who are attending can be very quiet and just want to connect. If they're in a room, there is a way where they can actually go and join a group of people talking. Whereas if you're online virtual here, when you say imagine a Zoom call with everyone, people don't like turning on their cameras. People don't like talking, and then the chats on the side in the call will just fly. And same with any other conferences. So, and then people have tried every kind of different things like breakout sessions, like dropping you into breakout sessions. And I really hate that. Personally, I don't like it. I get dropped in with a stranger. It could be one or it could be four people, and no one talks, and then I end up talking. Then for some reason, I'm the one recounting what happened in that room. It's kind of
different experiences with regards to that with breakouts. Because in some groups that I run, for example, that seems to be like a tired approach now. But for example, there's a NASA Space Apps Hackathon that we do yearly, and there's probably like I don't know how many people are there. Maybe there's like 500 something of us, and the breakout rooms are actually helping, and people are really enjoying it because they get to know other leads from like other cities. Okay, with someone from I don't know, like the other was talking to someone from Mexico City and talking to someone from Colombia, and so it was for that particular group anyway. It's working very well. But yeah, for other groups, definitely it's a tired, as I said, approach. So yeah, I think we just need to just keep on thinking other ways to make it more interesting. But honestly, and I'm glad that Rebuild is focused on like hybrid, events now, because as I said earlier, I was in a meeting and we're planning some events. Like Samsung is hosting an event of mine on Tuesday at one of their experience stores. So I'm glad it's like coming back. It's going to be a hybrid one, and we're being very careful as well as to like how many people we're letting in, and how like we're requiring them to show proof of vaccination and be masked up during the event. But I'm really glad that slowly we're trying to get some of the in-person back, because it's really been I guess tiring for everyone to have virtual events.
What about you, James? When it comes to hybrid events, kind of, I know in the UK things are kind of more open than it is here in Ireland. So, and I noticed just before we joined that there was quite a number of people in the the center, Bradfield Centre you're in. So, what's the kind of, I suppose, in your context, what's the situation like when it comes to bringing back in person events, even the hybrid? It's not in person.
I mean, I think it's too early to be too definitive about the popularity or the potential success of hybrid events. We've talked about it for a few months, but I haven't seen a ton of them. I think, people are still trying to figure it out. I've not yet seen a platform, so to speak, that can do that in a compelling way, but who knows, there might be something around the corner. I think my concern with hybrid is you need to be really clear about what the point of your event is, and is the whole essence of your event the in-person magic that comes from being in the same room as someone, or can it be replicated virtually or in a hybrid way? I think it will vary based on your event and the kind of culture you have in your community. I think the thing to avoid is obviously delivering an experience that's bad for both the virtual attendees and the in-person attendees, because the vibe of it or the kind of flow or the natural feel of it could be disruptive by trying to cater to two very different audiences at the same time. So I think the jury's out on that one. I mean, we have struck a deal with a local company to offer really cheap video streaming and video recording capability to all our event organizers. So if you do want to do that, we've facilitated that in a really affordable way. So, you don't have to be a well-sponsored, kind of conference to afford that. That's affordable to any kind of community meetup organizer. So, we're starting to see some interest in that service, but I think the time will tell. But I think, like I say, the main thing for me with hybrid is just being clear on if it's suitable for what you're trying to achieve with the community. I mean, I echo what everyone said. You know, my experience with them has been bad. There's nothing more awkward than being, as you said, Vicky, put into a room or a group with a bunch of strangers online, and it's so awkward. And I think, you know, the thing that a lot of people, I always try to, even though I've spent, 20 years at events, I always fly the flag for the introvert. And I think people really make a mistake. They're thinking everyone that goes to an event is an extrovert and is a natural networker, right? I am not. I'm introverted, right? So the worst possible thing for me is to be put into a virtual room with 4 strangers and expected to start a conversation.
I'm a closet introvert.
Yeah.
I'm a closet introvert.
So I can, I can fake being extroverted for a certain amount of time, but
then you escape to a quiet corner.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exhausting, and I'm sure any introverts on the line will agree with me. So power to introverts. But yeah, I think you can develop strategies to cope with that in an in-person event. But it's so hard for an online event because you're kind of forced to engage.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jen. Yep.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I agree with James in terms of hybrid events. That is still very there are a lot of unknowns. And honestly, the Tuesday event that I'm organizing is like an experiment. So we're doing that with Twitter. So it's going to be an experiment. And today we run through a lot of things with Samsung, who's hosting the event, in terms of how we combine the in-person experience with the virtual, experience for attendees, or calling it virtually. So we will see, on Tuesday how it's all going to work out. It's for me as I said, a practice or an experiment for future hybrid events that we're planning. Because I've got another one planned in November, and that's supposed to be for 700 people, which is half of what we had 2 years ago in person for that particular event. So we'll see. It's going to be very interesting. There's going to be a lot of learnings.
Yeah, the hybrid thing is as one of our chats the other day, I think it was Martin who mentioned it from GitHub. Are you running hybrid? Okay, why? What are you trying to depending on where you are in terms of if you the value chain, or are you a conference or summit organizer, a program manager, or just a part-time once a month meetup organizer? Biting off more than you chew, and meetups are already if they're the foundational asset to enable a lot of activity locally, there's a lot to do. And so what are you trying to do? What are you trying to optimize for? And if you stretch yourself too far, well then that's, as suggested, it's going to be more work, it's going to be more complex, and probably the event isn't going to be the greatest output. So it's I think, and something similar to what we're doing here, right? Are we optimizing for engagements or content? What's the purpose, right? So for our purpose for this, for example, is content more so than actual in-person right now engagement. And I think the same is for hybrid. What are you trying to do?
Yeah, so for me, the reason why I'm starting to look into hybrid events is also to kind of build up people's confidence that we are actually heading towards going back to in-person again. So this is for me, it's going to be a slow process, and very, very carefully organized as well. As I said, we're requiring people to be vaccinated and be masked up and all that. And all our speakers who will be maskless during the event, they have to actually do a test before the event, the lateral, not the PCR ones, which are very expensive, but just the lateral, flow test. That's good enough. As long as obviously it comes up as negative, then yes, we're happy for them to speak at the event. But yeah, for me, really, it's slowly building people's confidence into going back to in-person events again.
I think one thing bears in mind as we start having hybrid or full in-person events is there's still going to be problems with I say security would be my thing that would be alarm bells in my head is, okay, if I'm in a venue and I'm asking people to do tests and putting it out there in social and everything, that it's going to be tested. People have to wear masks. In Ireland, we have to wear masks indoors. But of course, there's going to be the other set of people who are not going to be compliant. That even if they're not attending your event, they're going to try and cause a ruckus outside. Like, have you thought about that kind of security and protection for the community? I know there's only so much you can do. It's great if you're in a venue or if you run a conference and they have security detail there. But what what if you're like running it by yourself and you're a local meetup organizer? I think it's just I don't want to scare people away as well, but I think it's something to bear in mind when it comes to that. You never know. It could somehow someone caught wind and suddenly there's a whole bunch of people, you know, shouting at you, at all the people.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible. You know. I mean, where I'm holding the event, it's around King's Cross. And just the other day, there were like people, I think, trying to get into the Google building, for example. That was trouble. So yeah, I mean, your point is very, but yeah, I guess we just need to work with the venue to make sure that there's enough
I just
security.
I was just going to ask. I was kind of curious, as my original question of maybe changing it was going to be. You know, whose responsibility is that going to be, the organizer or the venue? And then just as you were mentioning the venue, and maybe that's a nice segue to James. How are you guys thinking about that, James? Just like the, let's frame it as managing events during it and like procedures for that. Like, you know, is there a common reference being established by co-work spaces or?
I don't think there's a common standard, but, you know, pretty much everyone has, you know, reacted to either meet or exceed the government recommendations at, you know, every point in the lockdown. So, you know, if you go to bradfieldcentre.com/COVID, you'll see all of our policies and procedures. You know, we are lucky, I guess, compared to Ireland, that we are, you know, a little bit more relaxed state right now. So things like, you know, the numbers of people allowed into the auditorium and our meeting spaces is now pretty much back to normal. So, you know, we're following government guidelines and exceeding them in most cases, but it's a conversation with the event organizer to understand what they're kind of comfortable with. So, for example, you know, our auditorium can hold about 120 people, but if the event organizer doesn't feel comfortable at that level of occupancy, then, you know, they can configure that space to however they want to use it. And we also just benefit from the architecture of our building is very big open spaces. So we have a huge atrium area, which I think a lot of people now are looking at using rather than the auditorium, because it just gives you so much more space, you know, so much more, natural light, more air, you know, all of those kinds of things. But we've looked at everything from top to bottom down to our air conditioning system, cleaning, everything. You know, it's all published on our website.
Nice, cool.
So back to kind of with the who is responsible besides the venue and the organizer as well, because I think from Irish Tech Community in Slack I saw there was someone mentioned a conference. I can't remember the name of the conference, but it's not held in Ireland. It's held in Europe, but they are doing an in-person one, and what they have, which I thought was quite smart, was they have different colored lanyards, 2 different color lanyards. One was I'm okay to shake hands. The other one is I just don't want to, no contact at all, you know, but I'm okay to talk to you. So it's kind of things like that are starting to appear, just to make sure that, you know, besides saying, you know, if depending on the country or the city or the town or whatever the government guidelines are, if you need masks indoors or not, but there's or social distancing and all that kind of, all those kind of guidelines. But little touches like that kind of thing, that's pretty good. You know, that I never thought of. Like, because lanyards, you know, as organizers, we order lots of lanyards, sponsor lanyards, and as attendees, you wear them and then you either recycle them if the organizers take them back, if they're not, or you chuck them or have them hanging behind the door somewhere. But I never thought of using it as a color code for, especially around safety of of the attendees of your events or your conference. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really good as well. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So I suppose, go on, Ian.
Oh, if you perhaps have other questions, Vicky. I was curious to kind of I had a question, but I'm happy to shelf it if you have it.
Go have it. Go with your question.
I was curious. We kind of went off on a little tangent there. It was interesting, some relevant points related to, well, from venues, right? Like whether it's the Bradfield Centre or other venues locally that enable or support groups and events. Then the events themselves and the organisers that are putting on events for the purpose of just educational content or just like social connectivity. I've probably a question after this, but like I'm curious the thoughts from Jens and James. Maybe I can turn it on you, even you, Vicky. In terms of reflecting now pre-COVID before we get to like post-COVID stuff. How or have you guys thought about the value of that in the context of local communities? Right. For me, I've spent a lot of time in the past year kind of reflecting. It's kind of lifted the fog, if you like, on local communities that, you know, in terms of what is the purpose and what are the value of them within a local region for technologists and developers. Any thoughts on that, irrespective of the COVID stuff, just the value of hubs, connectivity, events,
Yes.
community itself?
So for me, it's there are two things there. One, people get to learn things from events, and also the most important thing for me, I think, for especially in-person event, is the networking part of it. So I always make sure that that our events has, of course, like the talks, all discussions, workshops, whatever. But there is time always for networking. Because through that people make connections, can find jobs as well, and James mentioned something about being introverted. Some people, even though they're introverts, are still able to like make connections through those networking sessions. So I think those are the two things for me: the learning from events, and then networking and meeting people. And yeah, building your network basically, especially if you're like looking for a job. I always like tell people, if you're looking for a job, you attend meetups, tech meetups, right?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, I think community is everything. I mean, I got the MD job at the Bradfield when it first opened in 2017. So job number one was to try and attract startups to be based in the building. Job number 1A was to build a community around the building, because what differentiates an office from a hub is actually having that vibrancy, that diversity, that kind of excitement around the art of the possible and the conversations, the serendipity, the network connections, the job opportunities, getting the students at the university connected to the startups and the entrepreneurs. It's really that magical mix of that all coming together is really driven by the community, not the physical building. So without that, you just have a boring old 1980s style office. With it, you have a tech hub.
Yeah, I agree. Vicky, do you have anything?
I think Jen and James covered a lot of stuff. For me, I just had a very eclectic mix of jobs just from being part of the community. So my initial community was Python way back in 2004 and 5. And on the back of that, I have so many opportunities. And I've been trying to tell people, opportunities just pop up as it's a surprise. It comes up and just knocks on your door. And you can't plan for those. And it's only when you put yourself out there, it's scary. I know it's scary, and that's why you can't. Back to where it's very hard virtually to try and bring the people who are new to come and talk to each other in a nice way, as opposed to when in person. What I would do is I can spot people who are I don't recognize, because if you're running something a lot, you try to bring them, go in, introduce yourself, bring them into a fold with people talking, and try and welcome people. And that's, I think that trying to make that friendly and inclusive, that's all part of being an organizer, and bringing that into saying this is a very nice community. And people ask, why am I with this community for so long? I said, it's because, people support each other, and it's not just jobs, it's the friendships afterwards, it's that connection, it's the professional and personal relationships afterwards. So again, opportunities just comes knocking, and that's how I met Neill, really. That's how I met Jen, and now that's how I met you, James. Like,
absolutely, yeah. And
that's how I met James.
Same experience.
And I used to attend all the Twilio parties. James, when you were MD of Twilio, so definitely nice event.
I think that's exactly right, Vicky. It's just having that open mind to new opportunities without necessarily knowing what they might be. And I think the nice thing about the tech community is your level of participation can scale with your comfort level. So it might be completely overwhelming to jump in at something like Lisbon Web Summit with 50,000 people. It's probably more than that now, I don't know. You can find your tribe by going to a programming language meetup or an SEO meetup where you've got 20, 30, 40 people, where you know that you're going to have, common interest. And that's just your launch point, right? You can then explore, go to more groups, get more kind of adventurous, and you end up on the main stage at Lisbon giving some keynote presentation. I think that's how most of our careers have started.
I think for a lot of us, we have this platform where we can encourage people to go to these meetups, and why it's so important to go to these kind of basically meet all these local tech communities in the areas that you're interested in, because it's surprising how even at jobs fairs, when I go and I think I was part of a company that was running tech job fairs, and we were running a Python Ireland stand. We weren't hiring anyone. We're just a local user group promoting our community. The amount of people trying to give us their CVs, and then they never heard of meetup groups, not even heard of us, but not even heard of anything called an Irish tech community or a tech community or meetups at all. And a lot of them are just people looking for jobs, not just students. So I think for us having a platform, it's also like a lot of us have to try and spread the word on why it's important if you want to progress, especially in the career in the area of tech. Things are changing so fast, and seeing what's out there and the landscape out there. How do we actually reach those people, as well as the existing communities that can find us on Meetup as well. So that's kind of quite interesting, that what I found, that people still never heard of Meetup groups, even though there's so many of us out there.
I've got a bit of a story there with regards to Meetup. Of course, there are a lot of different platforms. We have Yard, we've got Meetup. But for Meetup in particular, when I started getting involved with the tech scene in London again, so someone mentioned meetup.com to me. And this is to your point that that a lot of people are not aware of what's happening out there. So someone mentioned meetup.com to me, and I didn't even go to the website and all that, because I said to myself, I don't want to go to a dating site because it sounded
exactly. Yeah, someone said that to me before as well. Yeah.
And then when someone said no, there are tech events, that's the only time I actually checked it out. So there's still a lot of awareness building in terms of different platforms like Yard, Meetup, and all these wonderful platforms that people have built, especially for the tech community. Obviously, it's not exclusive to the tech community, but there's still a lot to do to raise a lot of awareness.
And I think if you're a developer and you're going for a job interview or something, you might be asked, what open source contributions do you make, or how do you volunteer? 100%. And I think part of the questioning from my perspective would be, what communities you were part of? Do you volunteer? Do you help organize? Do you speak? And I think maybe as Vicky said, don't underestimate. We never hired anyone really in the developer relations teams at the companies I've been, from job boards or job adverts. We just went to meetups and found people that were doing good things in the community and had a conversation with them.
So that's so common. We've been talking about literally that topic quite a lot. It's the same for any generic job interview, separate just developers. There's a job, okay, you're interviewing for a job. So what is it that you have done? Because if you look at all of the, if you the structures or mechanism within a local or just an online community, it's separate to connectivity. It's learning, it's building, it's side projects, it's mentorship. It's that's basically all the high value stuff. that you can amplify within an interview or your CV actually comes from all of the mechanisms within a local community, whether that's like a meetup or a workshop or a program, a fellowship, whatever the case may be. But just on like almost going back, when we kind of like maybe think about that, you know, in terms of the value, well, kind of echoing some of what you guys said, and maybe also like a little different around both the characteristics and the behavior. And maybe we're a bit more specific of obviously technical communities, but like in terms of the value of like local communities, like if you look at the behavior, even though for years it's just been manual building and parsing together of tools, and still the characteristics would be from contributors to enablers and consumers, right? The contributors being the the organizers that are putting stuff together, and the enablers being the companies and the co-work spaces facilitating, and then the consumers, just the developer trying to vacuum up all of the knowledge, irrespective if it's a meetup or a conference, something higher up the value chain. And then like the last point was separate to the characteristics locally. We found something really specific with developers, and it relates to Jen, you mentioned on the job side. So one of the key things, the behavioral stuff that we noticed with developers that were distributed, they would always look for their local technical community, but the behavior was almost exactly the same, what they were doing locally as what they were doing online. So the curation of peer networks, content that's relevant for them based on where they are in their development and their journey, and career opportunities. So they would go to a meetup for their peers or for that specific company who's really cool, doing mad, crazy computer vision stuff, or the job opportunities. And we found like they were doing that online as well, whether it's the curation, whether it's Stack Overflow, Reddit, and YouTube tutorials. They were for jobs and content and peers, kind of doing the same stuff. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Don't know where that leaves us.
I was waiting for a question there.
No, I just went on a rant when I was thinking about like the some of the local value stuff.
I suppose. Let me pick a question that we had. Okay, like, has there been any surprises in the past year that you picked up and learned to improve your rapport relationship with the community? I'm just scratching my head. I'm thinking myself there in background. So.
No, I gotta think. And surprises? Can't think of any.
Okay, I'll start off. How patient they are when you try to play with technology. Every time when I do a live stream in the first few meetups, I think my technology has been changing. It's stabilized now, but the amount of audio problems and video problems, live stream problems, and how patient people were waiting for you, even when I kicked them off a live stream and because I clicked on the wrong one. It's the patience of people and being so nice, and they stayed for you. And I was, I was like so humbled on how supportive the community were for you, because I was just feeling like I was just gonna go hide in the corner because everything was going wrong. The gremlins were at it, no matter how small or how big, month to month, and yet they were there supporting me. So for me, is that was something that was more profound in the last year, was their patience. While I try to figure out myself out when I do my own monthly streams.
Nice.
One thing I can talk about, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a surprise. I think it's just really like the trend of like virtual events. As I said, like numbers are dwindling. Like you can see registration dropping. And of course, people turning up is a small subset of people who register as well. But one thing that I've seen that actually sort of worked, as I said, it's not like a surprise, is that for some of the events that we've run, there are obviously more views after the event. So what I tried and do with some of the groups, especially if for example the company has some budget, I will ask them to allocate some budget for paid ads, and then what we do is we run paid ads before. Of course, this is the natural thing to do. We ran ads during the event, and then we ran ads after the event as well to share the recordings, and that I've seen has worked well in terms of getting more eyeballs to the recordings, because I've seen that people are not really turning up on the day, but they seem to have time to watch the recordings afterwards. So we've invested in terms of advertising, paid advertising for sharing the content afterwards.
We found that, we found this exact same,
James, what about yourself?
Little kind of surprises, but I guess another kind of win for just the general concept and importance of community, really. I think despite it being brutal, for everyone, us, our event organizers, our startups, the priority for the last 18 months has been survival, to be quite honest. But despite that, the kind of bounce back and I guess the authenticity of the community that you build, right? I guess authenticity always comes up in conversations about community. And I think, genuinely speaking, if you're in it for the right reasons and you genuinely care, that builds up true relationships and true karma points for you. So in tough times, despite people, say, leaving us because they had to cut their runway, their burn rates, they come back and they tell you, do you know what, as soon as we can, we'll be back. And that's exactly what we're seeing, which is just so, satisfying and gratifying, and a tribute to the work that the team does to build that community. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, through my career, you see a lot of bad actors purporting to be community people, and they're just there to take. They're not there to give. We've all seen the folks that we're talking about, but I think it just is. Paying it forward definitely pays off in the long term.
I agree with that, James, to that point that there are some community organizers that are just there, it seems, for the business side of what they're doing. I get kind of I feel kind of sad when I see that, because I kind of feel that they're not being very genuine about what they're doing, and I feel especially annoyed when there are organizers that focus on like the diversity, women in tech, stuff, but I don't really see that they believe in it. It's like they're doing it because they need to tick a box or appear, I don't know, more attractive, to the community or their clients, if they're running a business. So, I really would like to see community organizers, really genuinely doing it for the community and not just for themselves or their business.
I think definitely separate to the like on the ground stuff, right? Any of the on the ground community people that I know or like myself, there was no strategic reason for you just landed into. I did anyway. Just landed into it, and you're like, all right, I'm doing this thing now. This is cool. Oh, that went bad, or this went good, and then you go from there, and you kind of get bitten by the bug a little bit, and then you're just in that game. That was for me. But then on the flip side, kind of community strategies for companies are definitely becoming more popular, more kind of relevant, but they're going to learn that kind of flywheel of complementary activity and understanding how to complement and support and enable a community.
Totally, yeah.
And I think one of the hardest parts of the community organizers' jobs is sponsorship. A, do you even want sponsorship in the first place? And B, if you do, finding the right partners that really genuinely care and invest in your community, especially now, right? In a post-COVID world where, budgets are squeezed, everyone's under huge pressure to show return on their investment. So it's even harder to find partners that are willing to put cash into community events. And we've all seen the sponsor that turns up, puts their logo on the slides, does their 5-minute talk, and then walks off stage, jumps in a cab, and goes home. They don't give a shit about the community that they're sponsoring. So that's a really hard part of the community manager's job.
Yeah, I find sorry, go ahead, Jen.
So it definitely is, from my experience running communities for, I don't know how many years now, more than 8 years, I guess. That community organizers actually sometimes have to tap into their own, and I've done this, lots of times, tap into their own pockets, to run events. And I always like say to companies, hey, you have got like budgets, right? If you really genuinely believe in communities, especially, to increase diversity and to get more women in technology, you need to invest. Like it's you cannot like be treating community organizers, of course, yeah, they're happy to volunteer their time and all that, but you cannot be expecting them to be the one financing these events as well, because they're not a company in the first place, right? There are companies, who has got budgets, so like invest some of those in the community, because this is like a true experience for me. There was like one event where I was asking this billion-trillion-dollar company for like a sponsorship, right? And at the time, I was like hiring Excel, because this is a big event that we're doing for a women tech event. And they came back and said, no, we want to, we're not going to sponsor, because we want to just use our budget, to sort of obviously evangelize about their product. And I was really so unhappy with that. And what made me so unhappy as well was when I got the that feedback. The day after, there was like I don't know, a tweet or something, and they're saying, "Oh, we're now this $1 trillion valued company." Blah, blah, blah. So I said, "Oh, you know what? I'm asking for a very, very small amount. You can even give it to me."
I think it's like sorry, Neill, just to jump in there. It's just again, this is from going to a conference in Rotterdam, and what they did is they don't allow any at that particular conferences. I love these indie conferences. They don't allow any exhibitors booths, but they do let them have their swag bags, put their stuff in there. And we are all grown-ups. We know how to use a computer and search. If we think they put their logos up in intermissions, right? But they don't shout out, "We're hiring." We're hiring. They just like intermission in between things. They just have the logos up. The next talk is coming, whatever it is, and like. But thing is, it's the branding can be there, but you don't have to like throw it in people's faces that we're hiring this, that, and the other. But if your people are there, they can just chat, and then if your branding is there, the communities we can trust the community to go and look it up if they think that thing is cool, your company is cool. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, Neill.
I reckon we've probably found like maybe our next topic. This is an entire rabbit hole. But I will say that like based on something I mentioned earlier on the characteristics of community, on like you do have, and I think it's part of the reason is there kind of is an established reference now for how to behave as a company and what to do and how you contribute. But my biased opinion would be like things have slightly changed, and there is, I think there is a necessity to have companies involved to help make communities sustainable, irrespective if you're running a meetup or some higher up the value chain, like an event. But maybe it's establishing kind of how do communities do that, or sorry, how do companies interact, engage, support, enable communities? And if they're doing that, they will expect a value exchange. They will expect and what is that without ruffling the feathers of community? That's something that basically we're thinking about a lot, because my belief would be that with companies and framing a reference for them, giving them structure and rules, will help extract finance and enable supports for local technical communities, whilst getting them value and not ruffling the feathers of community. But this is definitely like an entire.
Okay, I'm just gonna. We've like I say, there were about 6-7 minutes left, so we do have a question or two. So I'll read out from live chat the question. How has the status quo of working from home and video call fatigue affected tech communities in your area, the attendance and momentum, and how does it look now with stuff getting back to normal. So that was like from way early on. So I just left it for the Q&A now.
I think we've probably answered that
Did
question
a lot of that.
already. Yeah,
I think I think my friend Christina, we organise Women in Code Dublin, and she does Ireland Girl Geek dinners. She mentioned it was screen fatigue is the reason why she has stopped organising events or attending. You know, so I think we've addressed some of the so what approaches we've done to address this, and also keep people engaged and get involved. I think that is like a million, billion, $1 trillion question that we're all trying to seek, trying to find engagement, not just virtual and hybrid.
Yeah.
So I think that is still the question for everyone in the back of their minds, like screen fatigue.
And I think you can be duped as well by the stats of people attending online events, because, and I'm guilty of this, so I'm putting my hands up, is you tend to join an online event and you have the tab running, but you're off doing other things. You're doing email, you're doing presentations, you're coding, you know, you're not actually engaged in the content.
And that's why I'm saying here that, you know, we invest, at least for some of the groups that I'm running, we invested in on running ads and making sure that the recordings are shared afterwards, because that's very true, right? We're all guilty of doing that. First, you know, people are not turning up, or if they turn up, they're doing other things as well. So so definitely there needs to be an investment for marketing the content, you know, afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I agree. I just go back to my point on what's the purpose? What are you optimizing for? Content or engagement, or both? Hard.
I think this is something that a whole bunch of us have to like put our heads together and talk about and workshop on and stuff, like, you know.
So one thing I said to the organizers, as I said, I'm working with this 19 GDGs, and there's like around 38 people, 38 individuals working together. What I've always said to them, you know, the last 16 months we've been organizing events is, okay, let's not be focused on how many people turn up on the day. I said, what I always say is, okay, just give your best to make sure that the event is great, the content's great, and we'll worry about, you know, people viewing it afterwards, because we cannot, although we can get them to, you know, to sign up, register, we cannot force anyone or encourage them, you know, even more to like turn up. So the mindset that I always like stress is just make sure you're on the event, deliver a good event, and then, as I said, we'll market it afterwards.
Yeah, agree. Yeah.
Hey James, what's your parting words of wisdom for all of us who are trying
no pressure.
Help
No
me,
pressure.
help me. I'm an organizer.
Oh my God.
After following Jen's one.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of all collectively agreed that you need to know the point of your event and your community and what that community is there to achieve, and that will guide you, I think, in terms of, do you just pause until you go back and in-person's available again, or if you experiment with hybrid, or if you just, you know, deliver stuff online. I mean, one of our organizers that we work with really closely, you know, he's more than doubled his community during lockdown, you know, so he's seen a, you know, huge uptick in the reach he can gain by breaking away from that kind of regional approach. Obviously, you've got lower friction for attendees and speakers to show up, and his costs are less, you know, in terms of not having to worry about venues and food and AV and all those kinds of things. So, you know, I think there's some positives coming off the back of the whole COVID experience. But as we've talked about, you know, online doesn't really replace human interaction and the spontaneity of that and the serendipity that you get. And I think, you know, as we've talked about a couple of times, it would be such a loss to lose those local tech community on particular niches, because that's really, you know, the kind of the heartland for the local tech community in terms of connectionships, jobs, sharing knowledge. You know, that's really the foundation of everything that we do.
Great. So I suppose we should, Neill, if you're okay with that, we should kind of, and everyone else, we kind of wrap it, because I think we're hitting the 1 hour mark now. So thank you to everyone for joining us in this discussion. I know we have loads to talk about. We can keep on talking about it, especially all the issues. And also, I suppose if it's offline, we have a lot of rants to do as well to get off our chests. I think, but we still, like Rebuild Local, we still have a couple of leader sessions coming up as well. So, this discussion kind of feeds in to a lot of the upcoming ones, and plus on top of the ones we ran previously. So thank you, like James and Jen, for your insights from your perspective. So in our upcoming leader sessions, we have one on Tuesday, 31st of August, from local to remote developer communities, a Slack perspective. And then on Thursday, 2nd of September, we have best practices for hybrid developer events. So I'm very curious about that one. And for people who want to, and those will be also live streamed. And then Rebuild Local also have local sessions, which is so for city. So there's a Dublin, which I'm going to be hosting because I really want to get into the brains of all these organizers, and it's going to be held on the evening of Thursday, 2nd September. And you can find all this information at rebuild-local.yard.live. And those were the Rebuild Local Dublin and other city local sessions. Those won't be recorded, so they're all kind of offline, so you can actually freely discuss about all your own, and also share all the cool stuff you come across with each other. So I'd like to say thank you again, Jen, James, and of course Neill. And thank you to people who've joined us on live stream. And and so we'll see you again next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.